Though times it seems like I'm coming undone.
Hello and good morning. Thank you again for joining us as we take this journey together down Easter week together. And it's been great to spend time and even just to study this out. I hope it's been encouraging for you and helpful. And today we're gonna continue reading. It's now Thursday of Easter week, and you know, I was thinking about as I walked outside today, the weather's definitely not as nice today as it's been for most of the week here. And I actually thought to myself, you know, this is probably about the appropriate weather for what we'll be reading today, because really what begins to be a really great day really ends in some of Jesus' most difficult days. And so I've titled today, Breaking Bread and a Battered Brow. And you'll see why we've titled it Breaking Bread and a Battered Brow after we read. You know, Thursday began with Jesus' disciples going to prepare a place to eat the Passover meal. And it ends with him taking the beating of his lifetime and beginning the process of him going to the cross for you and for me. In Mark chapter 14, we're going to begin reading in verse 12 together. And I'll be doing quite a bit of reading today, a little less talking. I think the scriptures really speak well for themselves here. Mark 14, verse 12, it says this. It says, "On the first day of the festival of unleavened bread, when it was customary to sacrifice the Passover lamb, Jesus' disciples asked him, 'Where do you want us to go and make preparations for you to eat the Passover?' So he sent two of his disciples, telling them, 'Go into the city, and a man carrying a jar of water will meet you. Follow him. Say to the owner of the house he enters, the teacher asks, where is my guest room, where I may eat the Passover with my disciples? He will show you a large room upstairs, furnished and ready. Make preparations for us there.' The disciples left, went into the city, and found things just as Jesus had told them. So they prepared the Passover. When evening came, Jesus arrived with the 12. While they were reclining at the table eating, he said, 'Truly, I tell you, one of you will betray me, one who is eating with me.' They were saddened. One by one, they said to him, 'Surely you don't mean me.' 'It is one of the 12, he replied, 'one who dips bread in the bowl with me. The Son of Man will go just as it is written about him, but woe to the man who betrays the Son of Man. It would be better for him if he had not been born.' While they were eating, Jesus took bread, and when he had given thanks, he broke it and gave it to his disciples, saying, 'Take it, this is my body.' Then he took the cup, and when he had given thanks, he gave it to them, and they all drank from it. 'This is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many.' He said to them, 'Truly I tell you, you will not drink again from the fruit of the vine. I will not drink again from the fruit of the vine until the day when I drink it anew in the kingdom of God.' When they had sung a hymn, they went out to the Mount of Olives." Let's stop right there for a moment. You know, Jesus, knowing full well what was about to come, he decides to share one last meal with his disciples. And I love this about Jesus. You know, he knows how hard it's going to be, but he thinks, man, I got to spend one more time with my guys. I got to get some more time just to show them how much I love them. You know, he even does this. He shares this last meal with his betrayer, Judas. And he knows full well Judas is what he's going to do. And I think there's a lesson in this, that Jesus loved even his enemies to the very end. He never stopped loving Judas. And if he never stopped loving Judas, what does that say about those who want to follow him? Jesus will never give up on us. During this meal, he teaches them. I love that he teaches them about the Passover. And he teaches them that every time they eat bread and they drink wine, that they'll do this in remembrance of what he is doing for them. But let's keep reading together. Mark chapter 14, we're going to skip down to verse 32. It says, "When they went to a place called Gethsemane, and Jesus said to his disciples, 'Sit here while I pray.' He took Peter, James, and John along with him and began to be deeply distressed and troubled. 'My soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. he said to them, "Stay here and keep watch." Going a little farther, he fell to the ground and prayed that if it's possible for this hour might pass from him. "Abba, Father," he said, "everything is possible for you. Take this cup from me. Yet not what I will, but what you will." Then he returned to his disciples and found them sleeping. "Simon," he said to Peter, "are you asleep? Couldn't you keep watch with me for 1 hour? Watch and pray so that you will not fall into temptation. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak." Once more he went away and prayed the same thing. When he came back, he again found them sleeping because their eyes were heavy. They did not know what to say to him. Returning the third time, he said to them, "Are you still sleeping and resting? Enough! The hour has come. Look, the Son of Man is delivered into the hands of sinners. Rise, let us go. Here comes my betrayer." Just as he was speaking, Judas, one of the 12, appeared. With him was a crowd armed with swords and clubs, sent from the chief priests, the teachers of the law, and the elders. Now the betrayer had arranged a signal with them. "The one I kiss is the man. Arrest him and lead him away under guard." Going at once to Jesus, Judas said, "Rabbi," and kissed him. The men seized Jesus and arrested him. Then one of those standing near drew his sword and struck the servant of the high priest, cutting off his ear. "Am I leading a rebellion," said Jesus, "that you have come out with swords and clubs to capture me? Every day I was with you, teaching in the temple courts, and you did not arrest me. But the scriptures must be fulfilled." Then everyone deserted him and fled. A young man wearing nothing but a linen garment was following Jesus. When they seized him, he fled naked, leaving his garment behind. At this point in the story, it's getting late. Jesus is finished up his last meal with his guys, and he decides, we've got to go out. We've just got to get some prayer time together. We got to go pray. Jesus is clearly feeling the emotional grind of what's about to happen, and he's feeling totally distressed. And so he does what I really think is a lesson for us all, but he just decides we got to go to God. We got to go to God together. And so he goes, and really for hours he spends time praying to God, and he goes away once for about an hour and prays, "God, if there's any other way, Father, for this to happen, let it be. But not my will, your will be done." I love the surrender that Jesus has during this time. He's asking if there's another way, but he also says, "But look, I don't want my will, Father. I want your will to be done." And of course he goes and he decides, I got to go back. I got to pray more about this. And so he leaves and prays for another hour. And every time he returns, his guys are sleeping. They've totally lost sight of what's at stake. But he goes again a third time. And when he comes back from the third time, he's totally resolved about what needs to take place. He's no longer questioning if there's another way. And it's almost this moment, it's this heroic moment where he says, "Look, rise, let us go. Here comes my betrayer." He sees Judas and the armed men coming in the distance, and he's ready to take it on full force. And of course they come, and they Jesus signals to them who he is, and they arrest him. And Jesus doesn't really have a lot to say other than he basically calls them out for being cowards. He says, "Look, why did you guys come and do this at night?" He's like, I was in your temple courts every day teaching. You didn't bother. And he knew the real reason. The real reason was they were afraid of all the people. They were afraid that if they did this during the day, when everybody was there, when he was teaching, that they would riot. And so for the fear of men, they came to him at night like cowards and arrested Jesus. And it's important to note as well at this time when he's arrested that all his disciples, all the ones who said, "We'll never leave you," they all desert him. All of them leave him at this moment. Let's keep reading together. In verse 53, it says, "They took Jesus to the high priest, and all the chief priests and the elders and the teachers of the law came together. Peter followed him at a distance, right up to the courtyard of the high priest. There he sat with the guards and warmed himself at the fire. The chief priests and the whole Sanhedrin were looking for evidence against Jesus, so they could put him to death, but they did not find any. Many testified falsely against him, but their statements did not agree. Then some stood up and gave a false testimony against him. We heard him say, I will destroy this temple made with human hands, and in 3 days will build another, not made with human hands. Yet even their testimony did not agree. Then the high priest stood up before them and asked Jesus, are you not going to answer? What is this testimony that these men are bringing against you? But Jesus remained silent and gave no answer. Again, the high priest asked him, are you the Messiah, the Son of the Blessed One? I am, said Jesus. And you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the Mighty One and coming on the clouds of heaven. The chief priest tore his clothes. Why do we need any more witnesses? He asked. You have heard the blasphemy. What do you think? They all condemned him as worthy of death. Then some began to spit on him. They blindfolded him and struck him with their fists and said, prophesy. And the guards took him and beat him. You know, at this point in the story, and this is where we're going to end our reading today, you know, Jesus, he's standing before all these religious leaders, and they begin to interrogate him, right? And they're accusing him falsely, and all these people are coming up and they're accusing him and making these false statements. And you notice Jesus's initial response to all the false statements is he remains totally silent, totally quiet. And I really believe the reason for this is because he realizes what's at stake. And he's not trying to get out of this. Again, he was resolved. He'd prayed for hours to God, and he'd been preparing for this for years. And he didn't want to get out of this. In fact, when he should have spoken up if he wanted to get out of it, he stays quiet. And then when they ask him if he's the Son of God, he speaks up and he says the very thing that he knew would get him crucified. He said, yep, I am the Son of God, and you will see me sitting at the right hand of the Mighty One and coming on the clouds of heaven. You know, he knew that saying something like that was going to get him crucified. And of course, it's at this time that they start to beat him. They blindfold him, they punch him, they spit on him, they mock him. And this is really the first of several beatings that he'll take over the next day or so. And, you know, I think it's worth noting, you know, this day began with his disciples going about their normal lives, spending time with Jesus, preparing to eat one meal like they had done many, many times before. But I believe the message is clear that, you know, he went through all this. He began to take these beatings, and you'll see tomorrow it gets a lot worse. The message is clear that Jesus knew all of the shortcomings of those he loved, but he loved them anyways. He knew that this part of his journey was going to be hard, but he was willing to go through it all for you and for me. And there's really only one reason why. Because God thought you and I were worth it. And that's really the whole premise of this entire story. You'll see it gets a lot more intense tomorrow, but God believed you and I were worth it. And so I just want to encourage you, let this resonate on your heart today. You know, we're all going to prepare to celebrate a risen King this weekend. But let the fact that he went through all this for you and me resonate on your heart. And every time you break bread, every time you break bread and drink the wine that represents his broken body and his blood that was spilled for you and I, remember that Jesus loved you enough to take the beating of his lifetime and to eventually be crucified so that you and I could be forgiven.
Here's my heart, Lord. Here's my heart, Lord. Here's my heart, Lord. Speak what is true.